Welcome to Final Bow. I'm Kenneth. Today, we pause to honor those remarkable souls who took their final bow, leaving behind memories that still live within us. Through their passion and dedication, they touched countless hearts. As we remember them, we celebrate their journey and the lasting impact they made on the world. Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa is widely remembered for his commanding screen presence and unmistakable intensity, which helped him secure a distinctive place in Hollywood as a remarkable character actor. Born on September 27, 1957, in Tokyo, Japan, and raised across different parts of the world, he developed a broad cultural perspective that later enriched his acting style. He gained global recognition for his iconic portrayal of Shang Tsung in Mortal Kombat, a role that became a defining moment in action and fantasy cinema and remains a fan favorite. With his piercing gaze and calm yet authoritative delivery, he consistently brought weight and gravitas to every character he played, whether villain, warrior, or complex authority figure, often elevating roles beyond simple stereotypes. Beyond major film appearances, his career extended into television, voice acting, and international productions, reflecting his versatility and commitment to storytelling across mediums. He frequently bridged Eastern and Western narratives, becoming a familiar and respected figure to audiences worldwide. Over time, he embraced more reflective roles that highlighted wisdom and mentorship, adding further depth to his body of work. His legacy is defined not only by talent, but by his magnetic presence, leaving lasting impressions that continue to resonate with audiences. 30 years ago this week, Hollywood marked the passing of Greer Garson, who died at the age of 91. She is still remembered as one of the standout screen icons of the 1940s, when cinema offered both comfort and strong emotion to audiences around the world. Known for her elegance, dignity, and commanding screen presence, she quickly became one of the most admired actresses of her generation. Over the course of her career, Garson received 7 Academy Award nominations for Best Actress, a remarkable record that reflected her consistent talent and versatility. Her most defining role came in 1943's Mrs. Miniver, a performance that earned her an Oscar and captured the strength and resilience of ordinary people during wartime. Even today, her films continue to feel warm, sincere, and deeply human, carrying a timeless quality that still resonates with viewers. Her legacy remains an inspiration for film lovers who continue to discover her work across generations. Her influence in classic cinema continues to be appreciated by audiences and historians alike even today. Marianne Faithfull, born December 29, 1946, was a unique figure in British music and film whose life showed both vulnerability and strength. She first became well known in the 1960s with her version of As Tears Go By, which made her one of the standout voices of that era. Over time, she didn't stay limited to that early image and kept changing as an artist. She went through personal struggles but continued to make honest, emotional music. A major turning point came with her 1979 album, Broken English, where she reinvented herself with a raw and fearless style that many still consider her best work. Alongside music, she also acted in films like The Girl on a Motorcycle and later appeared in Marie Antoinette, showing her versatility on screen. She was also part of the 1960s cultural scene and had connections with the Rolling Stones, which kept her close to the heart of that influential period. What made her special was how she turned life experiences into art. In her later years, she stayed creative and reflective, inspiring many. She passed away at 78, leaving behind a lasting legacy of music, film, and artistic honesty. Mara Claire Costello was an American actress known for her grounded, emotionally rich performances across television, film, theater, and teaching. Born on February 3, 1936 in Peoria, Illinois, she grew up during a time when American entertainment was rapidly changing, with television emerging alongside Hollywood's golden era. From an early age, she was drawn to storytelling and performance, eventually pursuing formal training at the Actors Studio in New York City, where she embraced method acting and developed a deep focus on emotional truth and character realism. She began her career on stage, building experience that shaped her natural, expressive screen presence. Costello later became widely recognized for her role as Rosemary Hunter Fordwick in The Waltons, where she brought warmth and subtle emotional depth to the family-centered drama. And she also starred in The Fitzpatricks as a working-class mother. Her film appearances included Let's Scare Jessica to Death, Ordinary People, and Buckaroo Banzai, Across the Eighth Dimension. Showing her versatility across genres, she later taught acting in Los Angeles, mentoring students with a focus on honesty and craft, leaving behind a quiet but lasting legacy in performance and education. Mark Volman, born on April 19, 1947, was a lively and unforgettable presence in American pop and rock music whose voice carried both warmth and personality. Best known as a founding member of the Turtles, and later as one half of the duo Flo and Eddie with Howard Kaylan, he brought a playful energy and creative spark that helped shape the sound of an entire musical era. With the Turtles, he contributed to timeless classics like Happy Together, a song whose bright melody and emotional charm continue to echo across generations, instantly lifting moods whenever it plays. His performances often carried a sense of joy and spontaneity, making him stand out during the golden age of pop music. Later, as Flo and Eddie, he expanded his artistic reach, touring widely, recording new material, and collaborating with some of the most respected names in the industry, proving his versatility beyond his early success. Beyond his music, Volman was admired for his humor, warmth, and ability to connect with audiences, as if each performance was a shared moment. He also encouraged and inspired younger musicians, passing on his passion for creativity and live performance. Mark Volman passed away at the age of 78, but his legacy continues through songs that remain vibrant, uplifting, and deeply woven into the history of American music. Kevin Costner was born in Linwood, California in 1955, the youngest of 3 sons in a working-class household shaped by discipline and movement. His father worked for Southern California Edison, and his mother carried the emotional weight of raising children through a life that rarely stayed still for long. The family moved from town to town across California, Compton, Visalia, Villa Park, forcing young Kevin into a repeating cycle of new schools, unfamiliar faces, and social worlds already fully formed before he arrived. That experience of perpetual displacement created a quiet survival skill. Observation. He learned to read rooms before speaking in them, to understand people before trusting them, and to blend in by studying rather than asserting. Later, he would describe that as a kind of loneliness that never fully left him, but it also became the foundation of his acting instinct. At home, his father emphasized hard work and practicality over imagination, while his mother provided warmth within the constraints of a restless life. The tension between discipline and longing shaped him early. He found comfort in swimming, in writing poetry, and in church choir performances, where he first experienced the emotional rhythm of performance. Even then, without realizing it, he was learning how to stand inside a story and make it believable to strangers watching from a distance, learning to survive by adapting, not belonging. As a teenager, Costner carried the habits of the constantly new kid into every environment. He attended California State University, Fullerton, where he initially studied business administration, a choice that reflected both practicality and pressure from home rather than passion. But beneath that surface commitment, something else was forming. He began taking acting classes quietly, almost experimentally, as though testing whether the pull he felt toward performance was real or simply youthful imagination. It was real, and it grew stronger with each stage exercise and small production. After graduating in 1978, he made the decision that would redefine his life. He would pursue acting seriously, despite uncertainty and financial risk. Around the same time, he married his college girlfriend, Cindy Silva, who became his early anchor during years of instability. The transition into adulthood was not cinematic or sudden. It was slow, difficult, and filled with jobs that had nothing to do with film: driving trucks, working at a fish hatchery, and taking whatever work could pay rent. Hollywood, meanwhile, offered little encouragement. He was auditioning constantly, but landing only minor roles, the kind that passed unnoticed in final edits. Still, he persisted with a kind of quiet stubbornness, shaped by years of learning that nothing in life was given freely or permanently. Years of rejection and the near erasure that changed everything. Costner's early career was defined less by failure than by near invisibility. He appeared briefly in small projects that never gained traction, often disappearing entirely from final cuts. One of the most defining moments came with The Big Chill, 1983, directed by Lawrence Kasdan. Costner was cast in a flashback role as the deceased friend at the center of the story. He treated the role with seriousness, preparing as though it mattered deeply, even though his screen time was limited. When the film was released, his entire performance had been cut, reduced to a fleeting shot of his body being prepared for burial. The experience could have ended his ambition. Instead, it sharpened it. Kasdan, realizing what had happened, later gave him another opportunity, unintentionally setting the stage for Costner's breakthrough. Those years were not glamorous struggles, but long stretches of waiting, rejection, and financial uncertainty. Yet they also hardened his belief that visibility in Hollywood was not granted by talent alone, but earned through persistence and timing. The absence of recognition during this period created a pressure that would later explode into opportunity, shaping how intensely he committed himself once success finally arrived. Breakthrough roles that reshaped Hollywood's perception of him. Costner's career changed rapidly in the mid-1980s, beginning with Silverado, 1985, a Western ensemble film that placed him alongside established actors and allowed him to hold his own with understated confidence. The performance shifted how directors viewed him, not as an extra or background presence, but as a leading man capable of anchoring a film. That momentum continued with The Untouchables, 1987, where he starred opposite Sean Connery and Robert De Niro. As Elliot Ness, Costner brought restraint rather than spectacle, grounding the film's moral center. Then came Bull Durham, 1988, where he played a seasoned minor league catcher in a film that balanced romance, humor, and sports realism. Unlike typical Hollywood heroes, his character was flawed, self-aware, and deeply human. By the end of the decade, he was no longer an emerging actor, but one of Hollywood's most bankable leads. The industry that once overlooked him now shaped projects around his presence. What made this rise distinctive was not just success, but tone. Costner did not transform into a caricature of stardom. He remained grounded, almost deliberately ordinary, which made his performances feel accessible even at the height of fame, a vision that turned belief into obsession. By 1989, Costner had already achieved mainstream dominance, but Field of Dreams marked a turning point in how audiences emotionally connected with him. The film, built around faith, memory, and reconciliation, positioned him not as an action star, but as a symbolic figure of belief itself. His performance as a farmer who builds a baseball field after hearing a mysterious voice became iconic, especially the line, "If you build it, he will come." The success of the film reinforced his desire to move beyond acting into creative control. That ambition culminated in Dances with Wolves, 1990, which he directed and starred in. The production was ambitious, slow-moving, and deeply committed to authenticity, including extensive use of the Lakota language. Against industry expectations, the film became a global success, winning 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. Costner had not only proven himself as a leading actor, but as a filmmaker capable of challenging Hollywood conventions. However, the intensity of the production also strained his personal life, particularly his marriage to Cindy Silva, as months away on set created emotional distance that would later become irreversible. Stardom, global fame, and the growing cost of absence. Following the success of Dances with Wolves, Costner entered a period of global superstardom. His role in The Bodyguard 1992, opposite Whitney Houston, expanded his reach beyond film into global pop culture. The movie's soundtrack became one of the best-selling albums of all time, and Costner's presence at the center of it reinforced his status as a universal leading man. At this point, he had achieved nearly every conventional measure of success: awards, financial power, creative control, and cultural influence. Yet the demands of that success were cumulative. Time spent filming, producing, and traveling reduced the time available for family life. His marriage to Cindy Silva, which had once been a stabilizing force during obscurity, began to fracture under the weight of absence and emotional disconnection. The same dedication that built his career also created distance at home. Costner himself later acknowledged that he was often mentally elsewhere, absorbed in projects even when physically present. The tension between public achievement and private erosion became increasingly visible, even as his public image remained that of calm, grounded stability. The gamble that turned ambition into public spectacle. In the early 1990s, Costner made a decision that would redefine both his career and Hollywood's perception of risk. He committed to Waterworld, a post-apocalyptic film set in a flooded Earth where survival depended on floating communities and scarce resources. The production was ambitious from the start, with a budget that quickly escalated far beyond industry expectations. Filming took place largely on open water near Hawaii, where weather conditions, mechanical failures, and logistical challenges repeatedly disrupted production. Costner was not only the star but also a producer, financially and creatively invested in the project's success. As costs rose toward unprecedented levels, the film became a symbol of excess and miscalculation in Hollywood. The press dubbed it fish tar, comparing it to earlier box office failures and amplifying public skepticism. Yet Costner remained committed, continuing production despite mounting criticism. The project became less a film and more a test of endurance, both personal and professional, exposing the limits of ambition when confronted with environmental unpredictability and financial pressure, collapse, criticism, and the erosion of control. As production difficulties on Waterworld intensified, Costner's reputation began to shift from visionary to cautionary example. Reports of budget overruns, delays, and creative disagreements circulated widely, and the film became a symbol of Hollywood excess. What had begun as an ambitious concept evolved into a public narrative of mismanagement and risk. The scale of the production, eventually exceeding $170 million, made it one of the most expensive films ever made at the time. Costner's involvement as both lead actor and producer meant that criticism inevitably centered on him. Yet internally, he remained committed to completing the vision. The strain of the production environment, combined with external ridicule, created a rare moment where professional identity and public perception diverged sharply. While some saw failure in progress, others saw persistence under extreme conditions. The experience marked a turning point in how Hollywood viewed large-scale, auteur-driven projects, especially those that demanded personal financial risk from their creators. After the peak, the quiet unraveling of personal stability. Following the turbulence of Waterworld, Costner's personal life reached a breaking point. His marriage to Cindy Silva ended after 18 years, coinciding with the aftermath of his most ambitious and controversial production. The timing reinforced public narratives that success had come at the expense of stability. Around the same period, his relationship with Bridget Rooney also ended, contributing to a broader sense of personal fragmentation during a highly visible phase of his career. Despite continuing to work steadily in film, Costner's position in Hollywood became more complex, no longer the undisputed box office guarantee he once was, but still a respected figure capable of major projects. The industry began to shift around him, favoring new stars and different storytelling trends. Yet he remained committed to long-form storytelling and large-scale narratives, even when commercial returns were uncertain. This period was less about collapse than recalibration, as he moved away from the absolute center of Hollywood influence into a more selective, controlled phase of his career. Reinvention, endurance, and the return to cultural relevance. In later years, Costner gradually rebuilt his presence in the industry through selective roles, directing projects, and long-term storytelling commitments. His most significant resurgence came with Yellowstone, where he played John Dutton, a role that reintroduced him to a new generation of viewers and reestablished him as a dominant television presence. The series became one of the most watched shows in American television, reinforcing the idea that his appeal had not diminished but evolved. Unlike his earlier peak, this phase of his career was defined less by overwhelming dominance and more by sustained relevance. He balanced acting with producing and continued exploring large narrative landscapes, including historical and Western themes that had defined much of his earlier success. What distinguished this period was not reinvention in the dramatic sense, but endurance, the ability to remain culturally present across decades of shifting industry trends. The same instincts that once drove him to take risks in film now allowed him to adapt to a changing television landscape without abandoning his core artistic identity. The second life of a star who never stopped betting on himself. Even after the turbulence of his biggest creative and financial risks, Costner's career never fully settled into decline or retirement. Instead, it moved into a quieter but still ambitious phase defined by control, patience, and long-term projects that reflected the same instincts that had shaped his earlier rise. He continued to act in films, often choosing roles that aligned with his enduring interest in American history, frontier mythology, and moral conflict rather than chasing short-term commercial trends. Projects such as Open Range, which he also directed, showed that his appetite for Western storytelling remained intact, but with a more restrained and reflective tone than the sweeping optimism of his earlier work. At the same time, he invested energy into music, environmental interests, and smaller creative ventures that allowed him to operate outside the constant scrutiny of blockbuster filmmaking. This phase of his life was less about reclaiming dominance and more about sustaining relevance on his own terms. When Yellowstone arrived, it didn't reinvent him so much as recontextualize him, placing his familiar qualities of quiet authority and emotional restraint into a modern television format that reached massive audiences. In many ways, this later stage of his career reflects a full circle, a return to steady, character-driven storytelling after decades of building, losing, and rebuilding on an increasingly visible scale. Conclusion of a career shaped by conviction and consequence. Kevin Costner's career reflects a pattern that rarely fits cleanly into Hollywood narratives of rise and fall. From early instability and repeated rejection to global fame and controversial ambition, his trajectory is defined less by a single arc than by repeated cycles of risk, success, and personal cost. Films like Dances with Wolves and Waterworld represent opposite ends of that spectrum, one celebrated as visionary achievement, the other criticized as excess. Yet both were driven by the same underlying trait, conviction strong enough to override caution. His personal life, including the collapse of long-term relationships during periods of professional peak, reflects the strain of sustained creative intensity. At the same time, his later resurgence in Yellowstone demonstrates that cultural relevance is not always linear or finite. Costner's story ultimately resists simple moral interpretation. It is neither a cautionary tale nor a straightforward success story, but a record of a man repeatedly choosing belief over restraint and living with the consequences of those choices in both public and private life.